I recommend jujitsu, and there's some holes though in jujitsu, right? There's some big holes in terms of self-defense. One of them being that you generally aren't going to have the focus on self-defense in terms of like, how do you deal with a punch? How do you deal with somebody trying to kick you? Now, some of this stuff is inherent in just the way you train jujitsu, right? If you're comfortable closing distance, you can deal with punches, and it's an easy thing to add on. But stand-up is a big gaping hole in most people's jujitsu, even stand-up clinch fighting. But in a self-defense, if you're thinking about jiu-jitsu in terms of self-defense, you are doing it to get comfortable in the bad positions, comfortable on the ground, with the intent of getting back on your feet. So I don't want to. Nobody should take jiu-jitsu with a self-defense focus and say, I'm going to take this guy to the ground, because it's probably the last thing you want to do when you're being attacked. You want to stay on your feet. But the way to stay on your feet is to get comfortable with grappling, right? So as a means to stay on your feet or to get back to your feet, jiu-jitsu, again, if you're not comfortable with being on the ground, if you're not used to being swept, if you're not used to popping back up, if you're not used to sprawling, you won't do it in a fight. So jiu-jitsu gives you all those things. But yeah, I'm not taking anybody to the ground. If you may fall down, right? You may get taken down, but you generally aren't going to intentionally take somebody to the ground unless you know that you're going to have a significant advantage, right? So take that for what it's worth. Like I know that if I throw this guy this certain way, I'm going to land in this position. Maybe he'll hit his head on the ground, or like there's a weapon involved, and your best option is to just like terminal throw, like dump him on the ground and just try to snatch his arm as far away as you can from his body. But staying on the feet, right? But you can't stay on the feet if you don't know how to grapple. So that's where jiu-jitsu comes in.
So with that in mind, would you say that the goal of jiu-jitsu is to take people to the ground and bring the fight there, but the goal of self-defense is not? Is that accurate?
The goal of self-defense is to not get too fucked up, right? To make the best of a really shitty situation. The best self-defense, and I think you said this earlier, is to not get into the fight, right? So yeah, if you find yourself in a fight, some things have gone terribly wrong because you're not searching for a fight. You're not like going out trying to fight people. Otherwise, it's not self-defense, right? You're just looking for a fight. But yeah, so shit has gone very badly. And there is a spectrum, right, of how bad things can get. And if you're on your feet and you're conscious and you're mobile, that's all good. When the fight goes to the ground, you have removed an element of from that, right? So you're moving more towards shitty because now you're not as mobile, right? Now, the more skilled you are on the ground, the less shitty that is. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think the goal of self-defense is to win, and the going to the ground part just puts you further away from winning, in my opinion, because a lot of bad shit can happen to you once you're on the ground. Yeah, there's a difference between putting somebody on the ground and taking the fight to the ground.
Right.
There's a distinction there.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're comfortable there and you're in full control, you're not actually fighting on the ground. You're on top of somebody and you've dominated them.
Yep.
Right. But yeah, like guys will think that they're in a bar fight and they're gonna jump on a dude's back and rear naked choke him on the ground. That's cool, it'll look great, but there's a lot of problems with that, right? If the guy has one friend and he decides to kick you in the temple with a steel-toed boot on, you're fucked. So maybe consider don't lay on the ground or just stay on your feet.
Or how about if the guy just jumps up and falls back and slams you into the ground head first?
Sure,
kind of thing, right?
Sure.
So
right.
If you are going to go to the ground, stay on top.
Yeah, and I guess to back up a little bit, the one of the primary things you want to do when you're thinking about, so in jiu-jitsu, right, you're creating opportunities, you're capitalizing on opportunities, you're reacting to your opponent. So it's depending on what happens at any given time, there's kind of like this you can kind of imagine like, okay, I'm in this position, and then these are the possible decisions, these are the possible variables, these are all the things that can happen from here, and then that's constantly shifting throughout that fight, right, throughout that match or that fight or whatever it is. So that's one of the cool things. It's very at the same time, it's really simple, but it's also extremely complex, because depending on what each guy knows who's fighting, things can go in all kinds of different ways. So there's like these big giant decision trees that are kind of shifting all the time when you're doing jujitsu. In a self-defense context, your job is to minimize as many variables as possible through skill or positioning or weapons or whatever. But you want to take away as many variables as possible. And I guess my point is that going to the ground just opens up a new set of variables that you probably don't want to deal with.